Thank you very much indeed for the introduction. And just as an icebreaker, if you look at the title of the theatre here, The Bird Salmon, and you shorten that to BS, and many of you that know me will think that's entirely appropriate. Anyway, not too much of that in this. I want to take you through, first of all, a little bit about what HTMA is about and what we're working at the minute. I think then that it would be important to look at the context within which we're trying to deliver and how we're going to try and improve delivery within that context. I then want to move on and talk a little bit about some good examples of delivery to optimise outcomes, and finally, what would the private sector actually bring to the whole idea of collaborative contracting, and all in 15 minutes or roughly. So HTMA, Highways Term Maintenance Association, for those of you that don't know, we're a trade association formed in 2005, specifically looking after highways management and maintenance industry in the UK. Much of what we do is about raising the profile, both of the association and indeed of the wider highways maintenance industry, and indeed improving the image of that. So we're trying to get away from the image of this being a dirty industry, a dangerous industry, a low-paid industry, male-dominated, etc., etc. So we have an enormous amount of work, as you can appreciate, to try and improve the reality and indeed the perception. We do a considerable amount of influencing, and we work very, very closely with the Department for Transport, and we have good relationships with a number of clients, from Highways England to a wide range of local authority clients. And I suppose recently, one of our success stories to date, and we need to keep building on it, is the work that we've been doing and leading on the very, very important issue of road worker safety, where we're trying to do something to actually improve the horrendous safety record of road workers out on the network. And we're very, very pleased yesterday that Andrew Jones, in his piece, actually name-checked us in terms of the way that we're working on road worker safety and how that fits with the work that Highways England are doing as well. We employ about 30,000 people, and we have an annual value of works of about £3.6 billion. So, this is a big business, this is a big industry. We have a lot of delivery experience, and probably most important of all, we're prepared to bring that delivery experience to bear, which is part of what I'm going to do today, but we'll also do it individually with clients, or indeed we'll do it corporately with client bodies. Turning quickly to the context in which we are working, and I'm no better than I'm sure many of you in this room are about trying to predict the future, which is why I put the future question mark, and indeed in my slides you'll see quite a few question marks because we're not terribly certain where we're going. I think what we do want to do is we want to understand the issues, and it's only when we do that we can then start to move forward. So the first thing, and Richard touched on there, was we've now got the publication of a major road network for England, going to be launched formally later on. And there's a couple of things in that I think are particularly important. The first thing is it introduces for the first time this concept of fit for purpose, so a road network that's fit for purpose. Obviously there's going to need to be a bit of work done to actually define that, and we would certainly want to be involved in that. We're going to see possibly the potential for a larger strategic road network, taking some of the main roads from local authorities to the strategic road network. And also the possibility, and it's flagged up, of possibly funding some of that additional work and that additional network through vacant excise duty, which is going to be put into a national infrastructure fund from 2020 on. So possible changes there. Funding certainty, and you might question why I've got a question mark after this, because you'd all say, well, we've got funding certainty. Everybody's been talking about how much funding there is out there, and we've had various announcements, and like all good politicians, they flog the announcements to death. We've got the roads investment strategy, which is a real positive. It's allowing us in the industry to look forward with a degree of certainty. But let's be perfectly honest, the work programmes that were to flow from that haven't flowed at the rate at which they were indicated. The profile hasn't matched the indicative expenditure. So I think there's still some work to do to actually say to us as an industry and to the supply chain that this is going to be a reality. Brexit obviously is an uncertainty. We don't know where we stand with immigration. There's a big reliance on non-UK EU workers, for example, in our industry. So what will happen in the future? where will we go with either EU trade deals or indeed non-EU trade deals? What about the issue of regulation? Is that a threat or an opportunity? You know, there might be an opportunity to look at some of the more restrictive aspects of the procurement directive, for example. And what about EU funding, which comes into the UK? So there are a lot of question marks around that. And there's a lot of question marks around the resources to deliver. You know, there's a lot of issues about capacity and capability, and we're working hard with a number of government bodies on that. There's a lot of sector competition. You know, we're now in an environment where HS2, for example, is kicking off nuclear, water, rail. At the end of the day, you know, it takes trucks to move raw materials. It takes holes in the ground to get stones out of. And those are all sort of common things that are all required to actually build infrastructure. So there is sector competition. And I would suggest that for those clients in the audience, that's something you need to be aware of when you're going through your procurement strategies. You know, you've got to realise you're in a competition to try and get providers, so you've got to make this attractive. Capacity and capability continues to be a big issue, particularly in local authorities, where there's been a significant loss of local authority experience, and dare I say, a lack of commercial skills and commercial awareness in there. And you know, it's hard to see that improving, certainly in the short term. Just turning quickly to investment, we talked about the uncertainty around that, or the certainty around it. And you know, the one thing I can say without fear of contradiction is that there is now political support for infrastructure, and most importantly, it's cross-party. So we can sort of tick the box on that one. Not leave it behind us, because we still need to continue to emphasise the importance of that, but nevertheless there have been significant strides made in that. And we've got the 6 billion for the strategic road network and the 6 billion for local roads. I've talked about vehicle excise duty, and some of us in the industry are looking forward with a degree of optimism towards the autumn statement, with an indication that there may possibly be a fiscal stimulus, particularly around these local road schemes, where you know the contracts are already in place. Resources are there or can be switched in to actually deliver very, very quickly and actually make a big impact in a short space of time on local economies. And I think government understands that message, and more importantly, Treasury understands that message. So don't say Geoff Allister said it, but I am optimistic. We've also got a long-term view, which again has been something we in the industry have been crying out for, and we're very pleased with that through the roads investment strategy. And that's given companies in the supply chain confidence to invest in people, plant and equipment, and to develop supplier relationships. And there's been a bit of work done by Sika over a number of years, which shows that you know the efficiencies of having that longer-term view and that confidence to develop relationships can lead to efficiency savings of somewhere between 15% and 20%. So that's very, very important for us. Still some issues obviously in local authorities around the capital revenue split, the fact that capital isn't ring-fenced. We in HTMA are very, very pleased with the incentivised funding. We lobbied very strongly with the department to include an element of incentivised funding in local authorities' allocations. I think it's fair to say we would like to see a bigger percentage incentivised, but nevertheless we accept what's there and we're happy with that. But let's not forget revenue funding. And you know, there's a lot of talk about resilience, and you know, many of us have been at the coal face over a number of very, very difficult winters going back to 2009-10. And I see colleagues from Transport Scotland here who know this better than most. And you know, a lot of your resilience is actually funded through revenue. And you know, when those revenue funding cuts go in, what do you do about your drainage outfalls, your drainage channels? Your winter service operations largely funded through revenue. So you know, some very, very big issues there. There are some areas for improvement. You know, let's be honest about it. Things could always be better. And you know, when we think about the whole procurement exercise, I think one of the things that we in the industry would want to see is better pre-procurement engagement. You know, this isn't a dirty word. You know, engaging with your provider chain in advance of procurement is covered in the regulations, permitted in the regulations. So we would call for more of that. I think what we'd also want to see from clients is we'd like to see the strategic rationale for procurement changes. We fully understand it's clients' prerogative to do this, but we would like to understand their strategic objectives for the procurement models that they're taking forward. And we'd like to be assured that there is then a robust assessment done of the effectiveness of those models at some stage after they're implemented. We're always calling for more details on forward programmes, so again what we're saying to clients is, yeah, it's fine to see a figure of £6 billion expenditure over a 5-year period, but what does that translate into? Where are those schemes on the ground? At what time are they going to be brought forward? What's the geographic layout of those schemes? Because there are big differences across the regions of England in terms of delivering those, so more detail on those. And obviously that longer term certainty which helps to drive innovation and cost reductions. So taking account of all of that and moving to look at now how we would deliver to optimise outcomes, the one thing that we have as a focus all the time is the paramount need to deliver taxpayer value. So we're very, very pleased when government commits money to investment, and we do understand that the taxpayer has every right and indeed will demand a return on that, and we need to play our part in that. So what we've done is a bit of work to try and show that how we can work collaboratively to actually deliver in a better way and optimise those outcomes. And we've produced a couple of reports on this. And what we tend to do in the business is we don't tend to invent anything new unless we're incentivised to do so. We're actually looking at some of really, really good examples where these practices have actually worked. So we've produced a report called Invest to Save, where we looked at the benefits of early intervention. We recorded a benefit in the case studies that we looked at based on business cases of about 2-to-1 benefit to cost. And we looked at the outcomes which are leading to a better road network, all based on this long-term asset management approach. So that report is available again on our website, and we've also produced another report on client-provider collaboration, really again based on good practice right across the business, where we've got integrated delivery of outcomes. So we're looking at shared objectives and integrated delivery of outcomes. There's a lot of product and process innovation. So innovation isn't just about something nice and new and fancy that you put down on the road network or some nice new bit of kit. A lot of this is about process. And again, what we've done is we've actually captured the cashable benefits. And I'll come on to talk just about some of the specifics around that later on. We've also, as part of that report, based it on BS 11000, and we've used obviously the definitions that are in there. The report has looked at a range of examples right across the UK, with a range of clients, a range of contract models, a range of scales of work, and different networks as well, urban, rural, small, large, and we've picked out the common themes in that. And some of the things that come out of that aren't terribly surprising, but nevertheless they're well worth emphasising. And shared aims is obviously absolutely critical at the outset, but leadership is very, very important. And that's leadership. Some people look at leadership and think, oh, that's the people at the top of the organisation. Leadership actually goes right down through the chain of command, and it's very, very important that you get that behaviour in your organisation. So the importance of leadership, and probably the most important of all, and something is, I'm a civil engineer, and some of this stuff isn't easy for civil engineers, and that's about the development of collaborative behaviours. And there's a very good quote in some of the case studies which talks about these collaborative behaviours being the soft stuff, and somebody went on to say, yeah, it's the soft stuff that's the hard stuff. So I think there's lessons for us all in that. Okay, well, why would you want the private sector involved in this? And again, turning to my Scottish colleagues, where I went up to Scotland and I was challenged pretty vociferously from some of your political comrades, is that the way I would describe them up there, who questioned really the value of the private sector. I went away and started to think about that, and I said, well, probably we've been a wee bit behind the door about bringing out the benefits of what the private sector would actually add to this. And bear in mind, this is all within the collaborative framework we're talking about here. So if you look at some of the things that the private sector can do, and you're talking about resource flexibility, most of the private sector providers have a very, very large resource pool across the UK contracts, and they've therefore got the ability to switch resources fairly short notice, and they've got the ability to manage peaks and troughs in workload, something that's very, very important to the client. And again, I have a very, very long-standing client background, so I understand only too well that when there's a bit of money available, you need to get it spent, otherwise you're not going to get it the next time around. And that's where your private sector partner can really help you out. Global knowledge transfer, and if you look at some examples recently where global knowledge transfer from some of our companies, again, who have parent companies in either Europe or America, and that global knowledge transfer has been brought in to really drive forward efficient, effective and safe work on the network, and again result in benefits. Commercial expertise, I mean, in my previous existence in road service in Northern Ireland, I closed a DBFO contract and I got totally immersed in it and thought in those days that I knew all about it. And then very interesting, when I joined HTMA, I was taken out and shown a real live working example of how the provider side dealt with DBFOs, and I thought, I wish I'd known that, Tony, before I'd ever closed the one I did. But that commercial expertise is something that certainly in the public sector is very much lacking. It's available in the private sector, and as I said to you, we in HTMA are prepared to make that available to you through that collaborative process. I talked about the importance of innovation through long-term investment, process and product. And if you look at some of the exhibitions around here, you'll see safe system and roadworks. You'll see my current favourite at the minute, which is the cat's eye laying machine. You know, these things are all tremendous innovations, and it's hard to think of a public sector client actually having the financial wherewithal to actually make the investment in those, and the private sector is able to do that through having these long-term contracts. Access to capital is a pretty important one as well, because again, if you're in a long-term relationship, that capital can be written off over a longer period of time, and there's also the issue around better materials buying power due to economies of scale, so quite a lot of benefits from that access to capital. Obviously, and you would expect this anyway, a very clear focus on service and cost efficiencies, and you know, it's important to look at the service aspect in there, and I go back to what I said earlier on. You know, all our members are very aware of the ultimate aim here, which is to, well, number one, improve the condition of the road network, but number two, give taxpayer value for money. So it's not just about driving down cost here, this is about actually providing value, and that's where that focus on that service comes in. And obviously competition, and there are some procurement models out there which I'm not going to name, but we do question whether that competitive element is in there, and obviously competition again used to reduce cost and improve value. So the final slide, what next? We're now leading on some more work on collaboration. We're actually leading on a collaborative contracting strategy, and we've got a very good team assembled which has both client and provider. So not just are we looking at collaboration in terms of what will come out of this, we're actually looking at collaborating while we actually develop the work itself. So collaborative contracting strategy. And in the work to date, what have we got? Well, we've got quite a few measured benefits. So these are the benefits that have come out of the work to date. Cashable savings, important to everybody. Certification to BS 11000. Effective claims management. Probably certainly one of the bugbears of my life has been this sort of man marking that you tend to get, where you get a lack of trust. And you get people sort of saying, well, you do that, and by the way, I'm going to keep an eye on how you do it, and then I'm going to watch you, and somebody else will be watching him, and then we're going to audit the whole thing. So, you know, slimming all of that down, that's all costs, slimming all that down and removing. Shared innovation, very important, and contractual development opportunities. And that's actually a fascinating one, and I listened to a very good presentation yesterday around collaborative approach, and the supply chain were saying, well, you know, prior to us joining into this collaborative arrangement, we were in a sort of a master-slave relationship where, you know, we turned up on time, we did what we were told. When we've gone in there, we've actually found other supply partners who are working as well, and we've now collaborated with them. Oh, and by the way, we've now gone off with them, and we're bidding other contracts, and we've been successful there. So I thought that was an absolutely fantastic example of how you can actually develop more contracting opportunities. And obviously mutual trust and cooperation, because none of this works without that sort of trust and cooperative approach. So those are all measured benefits. They're all available in a report. The report is on the Highways Maintenance Efficiency Programme website. It's also on the Highways Term Maintenance Association website, and you can look it up, and actually there's some very good information there. And at the end of the day, what has all that led to? Well, it's obviously led to improved road condition, and most importantly of all, satisfied users and satisfied politicians. So thank you all very, very much indeed for your time. There is no question and answer here, but I'm quite happy to stay here and answer as many questions as anybody has. I'm very happy to be challenged in any way on anything I've said, and I'm here for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.